This Quoircast podcast is brought to you by Ideas Digest. I'm Conrad.
And I'm Matt.
Each week, two optimistic Aussie blokes explore new and challenging ideas outside of our echo chamber on our totally realistic quest to achieve world peace, maybe some personal enlightenment. Is that too much of an oversell?
No, just roll the montage.
Okay.
I'm right and you're wrong.
What are you talking about? Straight men enjoy gay sex. What?
The Bible is extremely pro-abortion.
You're a sexist man who loves Jordan Peterson.
This is progressive? No, this is arson.
Do you think that kick us out?
I've done psychedelics 150 times in my life.
Why the hell should I trust you now?
Don't define me by what I do in bed.
Oh my God, these ideas can be like a membership key to particular social groups.
So break free from your echo chamber each week on Ideas Digest, anywhere you get your podcasts. It's going to be an amazing time.
Amazing.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Nat Turney. I'm with my brother, John. Say hi, John.
Hi, John.
Perfect. As always on cue. You know, I keep saying this, but it's important to mention that
there's at least one thing that I do right in this podcast.
It's not so much that you do it right, it's that you do it consistently.
Yes.
And so that counts for a lot. I'll take consistency over correctness any day, even if you're consistently just wrong.
Oh, okay.
I think that's a good thing. So, but
I'll work on that.
Thank you on being more consistently wrong.
Consistently wrong. Yeah. Work on that.
Oh, I love it. Okay. But this is the podcast that we have called This Is Not Church, because if it was church, you would have left by now. And probably I'd be going with you. Because
I would.
That's just kind of how I roll. But we are, man, we're just happy to be here, man. We're excited. We are into our hundreds of episodes. We can say that now, right?
Hundreds.
Because you can say once you pass over 100, you can be like, we had hundreds. 105, 106, but it's 100. Okay. But we're, man, we were just talking before we were chatting with our guest that we've been doing this almost 2 years, and it feels like it. I mean, scheduling snafus, John. Come on, man.
No.
But anyway, let me take a second to introduce our guest. This is Rachel Luna. She's with us today. She is an entrepreneur, a certified master coach, an international speaker, a host, and the host of the Permission to Offend podcast, where she talks worth, wealth, and faith by sharing radical, honest, and vulnerable stories from her life. The book that is out, or I'm not sure, has it come out?
It is out tomorrow.
It's called Permission to Offend. First of all, you got me with the title because I love it. I don't usually need permission to offend, but I enjoy it. I would solicit some permission to offend. So without any further ado, welcome to the podcast. Rachel, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me, gents. Lovely to be here.
Oh, we're just happy as can be that you're here. So, sort of our jumping off question that we ask a lot of folks when they come on the podcast has to do with faith. I don't want to make any assumptions that you've written this book from any particular position of faith, but if you did, you are free to maybe tell us a little bit about your background. If that has or hasn't played a role in any of this, I'd be interested to know.
Yes. Well, I didn't write the book from a particular position in that this is a Christian book or Jewish book or religious book, anything like that, because that would really go against the message of giving yourself permission to offend. But I myself personally am a Christian woman. And, for a long time, I really struggled with identifying as a Christian because there are so many judgmental Christians out there,
Yes.
And the hypocrites, the hypocrisy is just so much.
The assholery, all that stuff.
Yeah. That I don't know, something happens. You get baptized and all of a sudden you're holier than thou. And, your poop don't stink and you have no blemishes. And
right.
I have a real issue with that because I don't believe that that's what Christianity is about. But as I started to give myself permission to offend and actually question everything that I believe, everything that I value, everything that I thought I knew to be true, I realized that for me, my faith walk has been incredibly important. I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I was healed from triple negative breast cancer within 30 days. And people ask me all the time, how did you do it? Yes, there were practical things that I was doing, juicing and IPT, a low dose form of chemotherapy. There were things that I was doing. But if you really were to ask me what I think was the difference maker, it's that I had an encounter with God. Now, by the way, I was already a Christian. I was already drinking the Jesus juice and all the things. I was a Jesus freak.
Well, you said you were juicing, so I just assumed. That's what you meant.
So I already had that base, but I was literally on my face. It was the 4th of July, 2019, 3:25 p.m. And I was at a conference, and the pastor there, it was a Christian conference. She said, if anyone is dealing with illness, I don't know what she said, but I know I heard her say, if anyone is dealing with anything, and I knew that I had just 2 days before been given this diagnosis. And I ran up and I threw myself on the floor, literally on the floor. And I began praying and just saying, God, please take this cup from me. And I never asked the question, why me? Because I don't think that that's the right question. Why not me? Right? Why not anybody? Why should only some people get cancer and not others? The question was really, what do you want me to learn from this? What change? Where are you calling me to go that I haven't been going to? Like, what is the call that I'm not responding to that you would allow this to happen to get my attention? Because I really do believe that anything that happens in our life, good or bad, is to get our attention. It's a calling from God to get closer. So that was a really long-winded answer, but the bottom line is God, I feel that God delivered me. There were some specific action steps that I took to help myself. And then once I was all clear, I began writing this book. And what I really want more than anything is for people to feel as confident and as secure in their faith as I feel in mine, as confident and secure in their truth as I feel in mine. And then from there, I want us to be able to have conversations about what we each believe without starting a war. And I think it's possible. And I lay out the steps to do it in this book.
Yeah. Well, from your lips to God's ears. I mean, that's all of our hopes. I mean, that's something that John and I have talked about a bunch, that one of these things that we have lamented in the last several years seems to be just an inability, number one, to empathize, an inability to disagree without that turning into full-scale war, like you said, or to respect other people's positions enough to say, okay, I don't agree with you, but that's okay. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about then, just as you start your book, I mean, you sort of launch in with this idea of activating your truth. And on the one hand, that can come off as a little glib, or almost a little like this sort of a little cliche that people just live your truth. But there's a lot of meat there, I would think. So I'm going to assume that there's something to that. What does it mean for you to activate your specific truth as opposed to somehow embrace some objective truth?
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second, because even as I look at my own table of contents, I'm like, ugh, really? Activate your truth. Define your beliefs and values. Anchor your identity. That's the best you could come up with, Rachel. That's so lame. Honestly, guys, a true story. The problem is that I believe that at some point it's better to be clear than clever. And I had some really clever, catchy titles, but the reality is that most people are not living their truth. And they don't even know what it means, which is why when you see something like live your truth or activate your truth, you roll your eyes. Because if you were actually living in your truth, if you were actually connected with it, you'd know how much freedom that brings. And you'd be like, yes, I'll have a double scoop of that. Help me discover what it is that where I'm not walking in my truth. And so, yes, roll your eyes all you want. Not just you, gentlemen, but anybody. But I would challenge you to actually open up the book and do some of the work. Because one of the things that I did when I wrote the book, and I'm flipping through it myself right now, is every activity, I call them alignment opportunities, because the reality is that people are living misaligned. And this is why there's so much chaos in the world. This is why there's so much conflict, is because people are not really locked in alignment with their beliefs and their values. So I did every single alignment opportunity. And even I, as the author of this book, there were some times where I was like, damn, why would I do this to the reader? Like, this is deep. I don't want to even answer this question again. I feel like I've already answered it. But the fact that when I'm going to do the work, I don't want to answer, there's resistance. That's an indication that that's the thing that you should be pursuing. That's the thing you should be following. If you're resisting it, that's the thing that you need to clear the most. So,
yeah. One observation I would make then would be that sometimes inside of religious systems, for example, we're asked to deny certain things about ourselves, and we're asked to conform to certain ideals of ourselves. And I think that means a lot of people who are stuck inside of religious systems and religious institutions are by definition not living their truth. They're living someone else's truth. I think that misalignment can come in with all the unreasonable expectations that people have for you that don't allow you to be who you are. Is that a fair assessment? I mean, I don't mean to just pick on religious folks, but that's kind of the world that I live in.
That is. And I love talking about religion because I love the Lord. What I don't love is religious dogma.
Yeah,
what I don't love is the institution where we are. Let me take a step back. I don't love the institution that is forcing all these policies on people when the leaders, the policy enforcers, are not living righteously themselves, right? So when there's hypocrisy. So let's just, and this is a nuanced conversation. So let's peel back some of the layers. The first thing that you mentioned was about the religious component and people having to deny who they are. Well, if you really think about it, there's a lot of selective ideologies in religion. So, for example, if you go into a Catholic church or a Pentecostal Mennonite, for example, I grew up going to a Mennonite church, being gay, God forbid, you are going to hell, fire and brimstone, whatever. Listen, why is it that sin is condemned so harshly? But no one is condemning the fornication that's happening every minute of every day. We're not talking about the way that the church leaders are lusting after their own congregants. That is the same, that sin is equal. It is, and by the way, the reason I'm going to use, and I'm using quotations for anybody that's listening, that sin of fornication is equal to the quote unquote sin of homosexuality. And the way we would say that homosexuality is a sin, and by the way, for me personally, that's your business with your God. Okay. So I want to create a safe space for us to even have this conversation. But if we're going to call homosexuality, quote unquote, a sin, biblically, there are passages in the Bible that say that it's wrong, depending on the scholar that you talk to, because some scholars will tell you that that's not what it meant. It meant there were grown men who were having sex with little boys. So it was really a law against pedophilia. But it depends on who you speak with. My intention, and I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, and I'm still discovering myself in my journey with my God. But my intention is to say, look, step away from religion and step into relationship. Have you just had a conversation with God today? Have you just said, God, talk to me? Because, Tom, Dick, and Harry over here are telling me this is wrong. Jen, Jill, and Stacy are telling me this is wrong. And I don't know what's right.
Yeah. Well, that's I can speak for John and myself when we would say that we are both. I'm a former pastor. John's a former pastor. We're both fully affirming of all of our LGBTQIA plus friends and family. And that's one of the big reasons that sort of pushed John out of ministry. So for me, having to watch people that I know and love not be able to live that part of their life fully and out loud was enough to break my heart. And it was enough for me to say, that's not fair to put expectations. And again, I'm with you. I don't use I don't characterize people who are outside of quote unquote, heteronormative stuff, right? I don't characterize any of that as sin. To me, I would agree with the scholars that say that when those things were talked about in scripture, they were speaking of power dynamics that were harmful and abusive versus people in consensual relationships. I don't give a whit one way or the other. But having to watch those folks struggle with their own faith because they were not allowed to activate their own truth, to borrow a phrase, was one reason for me to push back against the system. And again, I don't push back against, who am I kidding? I push back against all of it. I don't. There are no more sacred cows left for me to tip over. But that's true. But I think I want to go back to what you said about this sort of misalignment, right? Because when you're living out of alignment with your true identity, that's got to cause problems that trickle down. Wouldn't you say? I mean, it's going to start from here and go. And as the problems, like I could talk about my friend Paul Young, who wrote the book The Shack, right? And so in the book The Shack, he writes about this character who's living in this sort of house of shame that is the shack, and it has affected his entire life because of the things that have been foisted upon him. His image of God is distorted. His image of people is distorted. His relationships are all fractured and broken. And it all can be tied back to all kinds of unrealistic and unfair expectations having been put on him to perform a certain way. That to me would be sort of paramount to living truth, would it not? To have the freedom to do that.
Yes. And if you look at how we're raised, first and foremost, is we're raised to fit and to conform.
Absolutely.
And be seen, not heard, ask for permission. Think of as children, we have to ask for permission to just go to the bathroom. The very thing that it's like, if you don't go to the bathroom, you could die. Like you'll go septic. So when you ask the question, couldn't it cause all these things? Yes. And what you start to see is we're seeing it right now. We're seeing a society where no one feels safe to express themselves because we've never made it okay to have a difference of opinion. We've never made it okay to have conversations and to question authority. Think about that. We've never, and this is why I think if you look at the history, why should we not question authority? Because the people in positions of power, they don't want free thinkers. They want slave workers. So if you're a free thinker and you're challenging the norm and you're questioning, you're creating disorder. You're slowing down production, allegedly. When we're operating in these moments of misalignment, it creates something called dissonance, right? So dissonance is when you have two opposing thoughts occurring at the same time. For example, I want to speak my truth. I want to speak up. I want to ask a question. I don't want to ask a question because if I speak when I'm not spoken to, my mom is going to smack me across the face because I'm a kid and I'm not supposed to speak unless spoken to. By the way, this is my life growing up. I'm Puerto Rican. I grew up in a very traditional Puerto Rican home. Children were meant to be seen, not heard. And it was always harped on me. Do not interrupt. Do not get into grown folks' conversation. And so help me God, if I ever tried, my mom would give me the look like, do something again, right? And then on occasion, she would whisper to me in Spanish, I'll get you when we get home, just for speaking. I mean, she was a lot. She was more talk than follow through, but the talk was enough to lock me up. But I had opinions. And then what happened is growing up, I stopped expressing my opinion and I started following other people. And what happens when we blindly follow? We're just led into destruction. So, of course, all kinds of negative impacts occur. And for someone who right now is listening and they're like, my life is pretty good. Awesome. I love that for you. But let's really check in. Do you feel free and safe to speak about your religious affiliation? Do you feel free and safe to speak up about your political position? Are you comfortable telling someone that you adamantly disagree with their position on gender and social equality and racism? Or are you afraid that you're going to get canceled? Are you afraid that you're going to be called all kinds of names? Are you afraid that you might lose your job because you didn't get a jab? Because if you can't say to me right now, oh, I'm comfortable in all those areas, you're not living freely.
Fair enough. I mean, I work in an industry that is, I got to find out, nobody from my work will listen to this podcast, but it's a very conservative bunch of guys. And I bite my tongue a lot. Really, seriously, I'm like,
yeah. Well, you have to.
Because it's the path of least resistance. I mean, I'm not going to go make a stink about every single thing these guys bring up that is offensive to me or I disagree with. I just sometimes smile and nod. So I think there have to be some concessions we make, right? I mean,
yes,
right. To just go, I'm not going to engage everyone I disagree with.
Correct. So what I say in the book is, let wisdom, not worry, keep you silent.
Yeah.
Right. So listen, should you open up your mouth and say everything all the time? No. Frankly, it's a waste of everyone's time and energy to do so. But what I am saying and my position is, don't not speak up because you're afraid.
Gotcha.
If you're afraid, then that means that you're not living in your truth. That means that you haven't activated your faith. You haven't given yourself permission to show up fully self-expressed. And it's to your detriment and it's to the detriment of others around you. Some of us have to be willing to step into the fire. Some of us have to be willing to get it wrong. I'm willing to get it wrong. That's the difference, I think, between myself and most other people, is that I'm willing to get it wrong. I'm willing to have a conversation with both of you gentlemen and say, I'm still trying to figure out this transgender thing. I'm not sure I understand. I want to. But there are so many other questions and nuances. And when I try to raise the question, immediately I'm attacked for being a bigot or, conservative Christian. And I don't think I'm any of those things. I just don't understand. And I'm wondering, will you listen to me long enough to understand me? Because I am for sure going to listen to you so that I can gain understanding. And that's the beauty of permission to offend. Seeking to understand instead of fighting to be understood.
Right. And there's a spectrum. There's a learning curve. Let me say it that way to all of this stuff. If you would have asked me 15 years ago where I was on some of these subjects, I would have parroted my religious dogma. And I think at the heart of all of it would have always been, I would have at least prefaced it with, listen, I love people. I don't think I ever found myself in a place of being condemning towards anyone, but I would have parroted some of the cliches. And I had to be willing to ask the questions. And what that meant for me was I had to find people who I could form relationships with where we could safely discuss these things and they knew my heart. They knew if I said, hey, I made friends with a transgender woman who was a bartender in a local pub. And I very, very frankly asked her, hey, let's talk. I'd like to know more about this. Number one, so I can address you properly. Number two, so I can understand and use the right terminology. So I'm not unintentionally offending anyone, especially you. How do I, and I think when you approach it from a place of, even if it's ignorance, as long as it's acknowledged ignorance, right? I'm like, listen, I'm coming to you saying, I admittedly don't know enough about this topic to speak about it. I'm not forming any opinions. Help me know. John and I both know several transgender people now. And I still stumble on the pronouns, and I still get worried that I'm not worried I will say the wrong thing. I'm worried that I'll unintentionally offend. But that all that starts from a position of empathy. All that starts from a position of humility, I hope, that says, like you just said, I don't know enough about this. I'd like to know more. But I start from a place of, regardless of whether I know this or that, I still want to affirm people in general. You know what I mean? You don't have to explain this to me so that I will then be respectful of you as a person. I just want to know more about the topic. I think that's healthy. And I think anybody who would jump down your throat for expressing it that way is probably has working out some other issues of their own.
Right. They just haven't healed. And so when what I've observed, doing this work for more than a decade, is that when people get easily offended, even just because you asked a question or you had an opinion or you were just uncertain about something, when they get so offended, they're so frustrated, they just go into attack mode. It's because they have now, their own identity has been called into question, and they haven't locked in to what they truly believe and value.
Well, but let me say this, though. I'll push back a tiny bit and say, what you and I are discussing are abstracts. For the person living it, it's their life. And so sometimes having their very identity questioned, and having to be put into a position where they have to even validate that for some. It's like, I can see getting frustrated. Why do I have to validate myself to anybody else?
I would posture that you don't have to validate yourself to anyone else.
Well, exactly. But there's sometimes an expectation from us. We've had the same conversation, John, haven't we, with members of the BIPOC community, where I've had more than one say, listen, it's not my job necessarily to educate you on the Black experience. It's not necessarily my job to tutor all my white friends on what it means to be a person of color in the United States. I think all of that is best done within the confines of relationships, right? Where we have created places where we can safely discuss, and we can. And I don't know. For me, again, I try to put myself in the shoes of other people and understand that for them, this is not just it's not just an abstraction. It is a day-to-day existence, and where they feel in this country, where a lot of times they're under fire all the time, and they don't just get it from religious folks; they get it from from all kinds of people.
Of course.
But John, I cut you off when you were about to say something, and I'm sorry. Now you're drinking a beer. Look at you. Every time I look up, John's got a beer in his hand, and I'm over here drinking Dr. Pepper.
Living the good life.
Hey,
I know, man.
You got to drink what you got to drink. I don't know. I think living your truth kind of is on both sides of the fence for that, right? So living your truth as someone's. We're talking about transgender people, but I don't think it really has to be about transgender. It could be anybody who feels like they're marginalized, right? So where I've come in living my truth is that I'm okay having a conversation with anybody who wants to disagree with my stance on, say, the LGBTQIA plus community, the BIPOC community, any of that, provided that your language is not hateful, does not push towards hurt or harm to anybody, period. If what you're speaking is going to create a situation where someone is going to be put in harm's way, or you are going to now speak from a place of hate, my permission to offend at that point is to tell you to fuck off. I'm literally not going to have that conversation with you.
John, if you can't watch your language, I will walk away in offense.
But I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, let me be clear.
In a kinder and gentler way than I just said it.
So let's be clear, and I say this in the very first pages of the book. This book, the work, is not a weapon. It's not meant to be weaponized so that we're arming attacks against people who choose to live a different life value system from our own. Absolutely not. If anything, what I'm saying is let's, with a compassionate and empathetic stance, number one, be curious, because curiosity is the key to clarity. So let's be curious about other people's life experience. And then let's measure their life experience or contrast their life experience against our own values and beliefs. So I'm not going to co-sign with anyone's way of being, in any shape or form of the way, if it contradicts my values and my beliefs. I'm not going to say like, yes, amen, go, whatever. I'm not going to become your champion, but I'm not going to become your enemy either. And I know that for some people, they'll say, well, if you're not championing for me, then you are an enemy to me. And I understand the position and I disagree with it, but I am available to be proven. I'm available for someone to tell me why my position is wrong. I'm always available for that because I want to know. Like, I'm so curious to know, like, but why do you think that way? Tell me more. Show me how what I've just said is wrong, because if you can show me how, I may change my mind. And I think that we need to give ourselves permission to grow and evolve and change our mind and level up our opinion and our perspective. And I don't think that there's enough grace around that right now.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think you're right.
I want to step back a minute here for a second and just talk about the book in general. So, one of the first things as I started reading your book was, to be open and honest, I am not a self-help book kind of guy. I'm just not.
Fair.
I have found very few that can help me. They feel,
because you're supposed to help yourself, John. They're self-help.
Right. Well, they feel forced. They feel, but what I appreciate about your book, and I really wanted to make sure I said this. What I appreciate about your book is that every step of your book comes from life experience. So there's a story that backs up what you're talking about. You don't just say, hey, we're going to talk about this and how you do A, B, C. And if you can't do A, B, C, you're not doing it right. Your version of this is like, this is what I'm talking about. Let me tell you a story about my life where this happened to me, or this opened up this idea for me. And I really appreciate that. That it's not just almost like a textbook, right? On how to be a better human being. I think we all read those. They don't work. They don't help us. But when we get life experience from somebody who's trying to say, okay, I'm also growing. I'm also moving forward. I'm also learning. I find that is a breath of fresh air sometimes. Within a genre that maybe a lot of people are like, here we come, another self-help book that I probably don't need. So I would recommend that anybody that thinks that way, give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Read it. I think you'll be surprised. You might disagree, and I think that's part of what you're trying to get to here.
That's exactly what I want.
And so there's like this pushback, right? That, maybe Nat or I are giving is exactly what you're saying, right? It's like, we can't have these conversations because in this society, having a pushback on anything creates you as an enemy. And you don't have the permission to speak your truth as you want. And I think that's, as we are having this discussion, it's very obvious that we don't agree on some things. And I think that's important that we talk about that, right? Whereas in this society that we live in right now, as soon as we find out that you and I don't agree, I can't be your friend anymore.
I hate that. And I seldom use the word hate, but I hate that because, well, let me explain why. Because I believe that there's always going to be something that creates separation. And why can't we find the things that we do agree on, that do unify us and come together for the causes that we both genuinely care about? Because now there's so much strength, there's so much power. And here's the thing. If you are, not you per se, but if you, the universal, right? at large, if we are constantly saying, oh, we don't agree on everything, forget it, you're out. Think about how many opportunities we miss to help change someone's mind and to expand their thinking, my own mind included. But if we're quick to say like, oh, that's how you feel about it, out of here, nobody ever changes. Nobody ever grows. We don't ever get to a place of tolerance. We don't ever get to a place of acceptance. So I'm willing to put myself in the line of fire and say like, but tell me about this. And for the record, I'm actually more agreeable than most people think, but I'm willing to challenge so that we can have more conversation. Because what I think that the people are suffering for a lack of understanding. And there's an unwillingness to be curious and to have conversations that will generate more understanding.
Well, coming from my perspective and Nat's perspective as being middle-aged, white cisgender men, right? There is a tendency to say, well, I don't want to offend any other nationality, group, sexual orientation, gender, period, right? Because I am unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I'm part of the quote unquote, and this is in huge air quotes, the norm, right? So that creates a situation where I don't want to say, okay, well, hey, you're Filipino. Let's talk about the differences between you and me and how we were raised and how that created a situation,
to that
right?
Conversation.
Or you saying that you're Puerto Rican, right? So, but being white, middle-aged, cisgender man, I'm like, well, I don't want to offend anybody by asking, well, what kind of scenario did you come up in that made you who you are? Right?
Why would that be offensive? Why would you taking an interest in my life? Why would I get offended by that? And this is the point that I'm trying to make. I think that I don't know when it happened or how it happened, but something transpired in the world and all of a sudden, anyone being curious about our life experience became offensive because you should already know that. And you should have done some study on Puerto Rican history to know the plight of my people. I haven't even done a freaking study on Puerto Rican history to know the plight of my people, right? Why can't we talk? I would be so interested to know, what is it like being a white man? And what's it like being a white dude, like, with your big old beard? And how come you paint your fingernails? Tell me about that. Where'd you get started on that?
That's a good question, John. Why don't you talk about your fingernails?
Well, I'm at the moment peeling it all off as we're talking. Well, I mean, okay, let's use that as a stepping stone as
sure.
Like the type of questions, right? So I'm 52 years old. I started painting my fingernails less than 6 months ago.
Okay.
And so the reason I give to most people because they don't know me and they don't really want an answer, right? I think we can.
No,
I think we're smart enough, right? We're smart enough to know people. Okay, so the basic question, like, how are you doing? We know that 80% of the people that ask that question probably want to hear, "I'm fine. How are you?" Right? And if I actually say, "Well, since you asked," and their eyes start to glaze over. Because it's just one of those things. It's like, I'm just being nice. I don't really care about you. But that's what I'm supposed to say. I'm supposed to say, hi, how are you? And you're supposed to say, fine, how are you? And they're supposed to say, fine. So when most people ask me, well, what's up with the fingernail polish? I'm like, I just like it.
Okay, well, what's the real answer?
The real answer is, at 52 years old, I realized that I can make a stand for people that I am allied with.
Okay.
By saying, yes, people who look like me, who you don't expect to do this, also can do this to show you that I am in solidarity with people who are marginalized. Because when I put on I'm not a big man. I'm not pretending like I'm tough. Let's not get that. But I have this beard. I have the long hair. When I put on my black leather jacket, I have my black pants on and my black boots on. And then all of a sudden I have fingernail polish. I'm telling you that I don't give a shit what you think. And I'm going to stand with my brothers and sisters and my siblings who say that it hurts me when people call me out for the way I am. And I'm there to say, I'll stand with you. I'll paint my nails. I'll color my hair purple if that's what it's going to take to get people to realize that you're also a human being and you deserve love and respect and you should be honored. So that's where this started. And so it started with black because it happens to be my favorite color. But there are given days where it's gray or it's pink or it's blue. I mean, it's whatever color that I feel like I want to do that day. But that's the answer, right?
I love that answer.
And that's the permission, right? That's my permission to tell other people that you also have permission to acknowledge your truth, right?
Mm.
But also to piggyback off the book title, it's your permission to offend a few people in a good way, I think, to push some boundaries and maybe move some dialogue forward. If I did that in my workplace, I'd just get fired because there are dress codes and people are judgmental and they'd be like, yeah, you're a contractor. You can go home tomorrow. But no, I love that, man. I love that. I love that rationale.
Well, John, I want to take a moment because I love that. And I agree with you. So, my perspective is I may not understand people's choices or, their lifestyle. They might not understand my choices. At the end of the day, the message that I want to spread above anything is to look for the heart of the person, right? Look for the truth of the person. And what is the truth? The truth is always going to be our soul, right? The truth is always going to be our heart. I'm interested in that part. So I'm so grateful that you shared with me the truth behind why you paint your fingernails. And I love that what I've taken away from this experience with you is that for me, how can I show more solidarity? Like, how can I stand more with other people that I care about that are being marginalized? Is there something that I could do? Is there a way of being that I could show up so that they understand that not only with my words, but also with my actions? So I love that.
Well, and to go back to your book, one of the chapters that you taught, again, I read this a while ago. So correct me if I'm misplacing where it is. But when you talked about your cancer, you are a cancer survivor. You chose alternative. I don't want to say medicine because that's not even really necessarily the way you chose an alternative to the very invasive medicine that they were offering you, right? And you got a lot of pushback from that.
I got a ton of pushback.
And, my Nat and my father is also a cancer survivor. And he did very specific, for what he needed to do, what he felt he needed to do was radiation. That's what he did, right? He is cancer free. You are cancer free. So, the point I'm getting to is, again, this permission to offend is like, say, you know what? That worked for you. It's not going to work for me. I've listened to my own soul. I've listened to my own heart. And this is the path I have chosen. For good or for bad, it's my decision, not yours. So you don't get to tell me if I'm right or wrong. You can come along on the ride with me and see the fruits of what I've done, but you don't get to tell me that I should have done something different, right?
That's right, 100%.
I mean, just how much pushback did you get? I mean, I'm going to imagine it was a lot.
Oh my gosh, a lot. I mean, and there's a section in the book where I talk about my own mom. I was driving one day and I was really upset and I don't know what I said, but she yelled at me and she said, "You're in denial. You're in denial." And I screamed back. Now remember, I was raised never to talk back to my mother, never to have an opinion, never to deviate or to question or challenge anything. And I yelled back. I said, "I am not in denial. If I were in denial, I would be doing nothing, but I am doing everything. I have taken on this radical diet where I can't eat anything that tastes good. And I cry all day, and I'm doing 5 coffee enemas. I'm shoving coffee up my butt 5 times a day. And I'm doing all the things that I know to do. I'm just not doing what you want me to do. And you have to let me do this my way. If you can't get on board with what I'm doing and you can't support me, then you should not be around me while I do this. Because right now, while I'm healing, I need people who are going to be on board, and I want you to be there with me, but not if you're not going to support me fully, because I can't do this. I can't fight cancer and you at the same time.
Well, and within the title again, this permission to offend, right? So my dad, my brother and my dad chose a different path. We also need to honor his choice.
100%.
Yeah. Well, him taking the more traditional route. None of us were like, whoa. Don't you think you want to try some stem cells first, Ed?
Well, but also, I mean, there were he had other options. He could have done surgery. He could have done surgery, which was going to be rather invasive, and it was going to be a long term. So he actually chose in his world, a less invasive option than surgery, which would have been, for him, could have been devastating. As a man who has prostate cancer, surgery basically means, long-term effects, right? I mean, I don't want to get graphic with people within this, but I mean, it means like, you're probably going to live the rest of your life wearing Depends.
Yeah.
Right. And that was not something that he wanted to do. He wanted to find another way. So he chose a path that might have been, quote unquote, even in this situation, less traditional, because there was an easier out for him. And he chose to say no to that. So we can always find something to argue with. It's like, well, is that really the best choice for you? I mean, and we can do that within job choice, which would be like career path, deciding, like we talked about off air, deciding to go in the military or not go in the military. Oh, so you're not going in the military. So you're not patriotic. You don't love this country. I think I love this country just as much as you two do. And you two went in the military and I didn't.
I think it's evidenced by the fact that you did not put on a uniform and fight for your country, John. That you actually don't love this country. I think you kind of hate it.
Yeah.
I'm just fucking with you.
But I mean, I think that's, and again, this is a 1,000-foot view of your book looking down. These are the questions that are brought up. And then you're like, no, you don't get to pigeonhole me.
Yeah. And listen, I even say in the book, I'm not against the standard of care. I'm not against allopathic medicine. It has its place. I did do a variation of chemotherapy. I am grateful. I'm grateful for modern medicine. So I'm not against it. It just, the radiation chemo package that I was offered wasn't right for me. I unfortunately have too many friends that have, once you get diagnosed with cancer, you're in this like special club. Mm-hmm. And so now like everybody, you start meeting all these other cancer patients and whatnot. And several of my friends have chosen conventional treatment. I celebrate them. I honor them. I pray for them. I am there with them every moment that they desire, because that's their choice and that's their truth. And I am here to support you living your full self-expressed life. Even if I don't agree with it, I'm going to honor that it's right for you, because that's what I think. Going back to my faith, at the end of the day, if I really am going to plant my flag in Christianity, Jesus was for the people. And who did Jesus have more problems with? He had more problems with the religious leaders than he did with the people.
Amen. True enough. That's cool. My wife actually worked for a homeopathic doctor for a few years, and he became a really good friend of the family, he and his wife both. And one of the things he talked about all the time was this partnership between non-traditional and traditional medicine. And it always bothered him that there was this false dichotomy, that there was this forced binary, like you either went this way or that way. And he's like, why can't we do both? Why couldn't we? And he would tell you if he was here that so much of the failure that gets laid at the feet of non-traditional medicine is because by the time most people have exhausted all their other possibilities as a last gasp attempt, then they go non-traditional. And he's like, man, if I could have got to that patient a year ago, and if I could have worked with their diet, and if I could have worked with their with some other non-traditional treatment in partnership with their medical doctor, man, we could have done some. We could have probably done something about this. And I like that because I'm getting to a place in my life where not just obviously with this, but in general, these binary choices that have been forced on us are so limiting. They're so constricting that we're always forced into these fake either or choices. And I'm like, no, why not both and? Why not this and that? Why do we have to have one or the other? So I like the idea, and correct me if I'm wrong too. Then, even as we're talking about, I don't think the point of the book is to be intentionally offensive, right? Prevention to offend does not mean, hey, you get to walk around and be a dick.
No.
And then I get to say, but Rachel Luna says, I have permission to offend, so you can fuck all the way off while I walk my truth. I don't think you mean that, right?
No, and I have to tell you the story. Okay, this is too good. This is too good. Okay, so there I am. I'm speaking at this event, 500 women, and I'm talking to them about sales confidence because I love to help people make more money. It's fun. I think that when people make more money, good people make more money, they do good things with it. So I'm speaking to this group and I say, why aren't you doing this? And a woman stands up and she goes, I'm afraid to offend people. And I yell into the mic, offend them. You have to give yourself permission to offend. This is where permission to offend was born, actually, at this event, when these words come out of my mouth. So the room dismisses. They go on about their day. Later on the next day, this woman comes up to me and she goes, I just have to tell you, I loved what you said yesterday. And I went right back to my room and I told my roommate all about herself because permission to offend, right? Am I right? And she went to high five me. And I said,
no.
And exactly. I was like, no, hold on now. Wait a minute. That's not what I said. So no, to reiterate, when we are talking about permission to offend, it is recognizing that your ideas, your values, your beliefs, your existence is offensive to someone. And are you willing to stand up for your truth, for your belief? Are you willing to take a stand for it while also not attacking other people for having a different stand as you? So at the end of the day, seek to be understood. Don't fight to be understood. Because if you're seeking to understand me, and I'm seeking to understand you, that's a whole lot of understanding, I hope. And if we can't, and I say this in the book too, look, if we go, 12 bouts around the ring, we just keep coming back at it and we're at an impasse, then what I say is, okay, we're at an impasse. We don't agree. I've got some work to do. You've got some work to do. Let's see if maybe we can come back at a later date. Let's table it for now. And in all of that, I am still going to show you love and respect because you are a human being and you deserve and you are worthy to be loved and respected because you are a human being.
Okay. So on that, I have a question. And it's actually coming from me. It's actually kind of serious. I don't usually get like super serious, but I'm gonna ask this question. So this has become a cliche in a lot of places where, it's like, hey, let's just agree to disagree. Because that seems the easier way out. But there's times where the people that I'm discussing or having conversations with, I can't agree to disagree because their level of hate towards a group of people is so harmful that those words, I can't say those words to them, right? I can't say, hey, we're just going to have to stop this conversation and agree to disagree because I don't agree with anything they say. Not because we're on different levels, but because of their version of what they see is going to bring harm to someone or a group, right?
Yes.
So how do you?
I know exactly what you're saying. Okay, I understand.
You don't go to a Klan meeting and go, listen.
Right. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to go to.
I see where you fellers are coming from. I'm going to walk away. We're going to have to agree to disagree. That burning roses on people's lawns is bad.
So, I'm going to oversimplify this, right? I'm going to really oversimplify this, but I can agree to disagree with you that chocolate's the best flavor of ice cream when maybe you say strawberry. I have no problem with agreeing to disagree on that. But when you say Black people have no place in this society, they're not the same as us, they are a lower version of us, I can't come to a place where I'm going to say, hey, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. Because that
100%.
So yeah.
So here's how we have fixed. I understand the question. So first of all, and I write this in the book, give yourself permission to let some relationships end on bad terms.
Okay.
Period.
Amen.
Point blank. Because there are, listen, honestly, there is a little bit of utopian desire from my book, right? Because wouldn't that be amazing? But some people are just assholes. And they're never going to change. They're never going to open their mind. They're never going to be willing to see a different perspective. They're never going to, even try to understand someone. And so in those cases, we're wasting time and energy that could be directed towards creating more community and connection with someone else. Yeah, so give yourself permission to let some relationships end on bad terms. And if you're in the position where someone is being racist or bigoted or just completely against our values and ideas, and you've done your part to try to understand them, then just say, I do not agree with anything you have to say. I'm not willing to agree to disagree, and I'm disengaging because you and I do not have any common value. And even if we did, I don't want to be associated with you because I'm so against what you stand for.
Amen to that. And John, just in case, I know you're going to ask me at some point, the title for the podcast episode, Some People Are Just Assholes. A conversation with Rachel Luna. I think that's a great title. Well, I think that might actually need to be the title of your next book.
No, it's not going to be.
but it should be. No, we can agree to disagree on that. That's fine.
We can do it.
HarperOne will not pick that book up. They're not. But no, I used to be a youth pastor, and one of the things that teenagers that I dealt with a lot of times struggled with was a desire to maintain relationships with everybody, even when they were toxic. Like it would just, you know what I'm saying? I don't mean that as a generalization. I'm sure there were some that weren't, but a lot of the kids that I dealt with had a hard time disengaging from people, and that's how I would counsel or advise them a lot of times. Like sometimes, you cannot have that level of relationship with everybody. There are some people you just have to, like you said, there are some relationships that are just going to have to end because they're not healthy, or they're toxic, or they're whatever they might be. That's tough for us, especially when you get wrapped up in a religious system that tells us sometimes that relationships are the most important things and we should protect them at all costs. But sometimes the cost of that is me. And in order to stay in relationship with somebody, I have to then, I want to refer to one of the titles of your books as Walking a Fence, because my wife and I both grew up in the same sort of churches. And this little phrase got used on us every time we were upset about something we were just told to walk in love, which basically meant shut up, toe the party line, swallow your feelings, just walk in love, and basically consider everybody but yourself. I like walking a fence better, which I know you're being a little tongue in cheek with it. I think what you mean is be you authentically.
Yes. Well, because listen, that's not walking in love, right? So not saying
not walking in complete submission or something.
When you walking in love, in my opinion, when you love someone, you tell them the truth. You're willing to have the hard conversation because you love them. And so I think that that's something that we need to recognize, that that's not love, that's conformity. And ultimately it's self-rejection and self-betrayal.
Yeah, and by the people who were telling us to do that, now I recognize that as spiritual manipulation and abuse.
100%.
Because we were being coerced into conforming, like you said. We're being instructed to pretty much follow the party line on something. The stories were not great, but that was the language they used. That was, got to walk in love now. We got to walk in love. And it was manipulative and it was abusive. So I like that idea. Again, I know the way that you phrased a lot of the stuff. I think it was a little bit tongue in cheek. I like that. And as I go through your book, I'm thinking, there's just, it just sparks a lot of ideas. And I think that was the point too, right? To get you thinking kind of like, okay, how does this apply to this particular situation? Or I just think it's really well done. And John, I've cut you off twice, man. I'm sorry. I have this habit. I'm going to cut you off again, but no, I'm kidding.
Well, I just had a couple things. One, coming from a place of love, right, is something we have to be really careful with too. Because I think all of us could have a story where someone came to us and says, "Hey, I'm just going to tell you this from a place of love," and what came out was everything except love.
True.
It was. So first of all, there has to be a true relationship there. It can't be some random person who you just happen to kind of know, who you saw in church every Sunday, and they're going to come up and tell you how to fix your life, but they're telling you from love. It's like, you don't know me from Adam. You don't
that's
get
not love. That's judgment.
Right. You don't get to come and say that. So that was just a little bit of a clarification. And then the other was this idea that, as you're talking about building community, one of the things that Nat and I were raised with was this idea that family wins out, right? Blood wins out, always. But that can also be very, very detrimental too. When
very true.
Someone in your own family is a hurtful person or not a trusting person, but you have been raised in a situation that says that family always, family first, family always wins out, blood always wins out. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on family issues, but there have been situations where I have put myself in harm's way because I was taught that no matter what, I protect family, period. And sometimes that part of my family, I need to let go to protect this part of my family. And that's a very hard lesson to learn. And again, it's going to offend a lot of people, specifically within your own family, when you let go of certain family members because they are toxic, they are hurtful. What they bring to the table isn't helpful, isn't love. It's some version of coercion or something like that, right? So it's always very difficult because the language that we are brought up in, be it family or religion, has a tendency to pigeonhole us into this idea that we always have to be there for everybody, specifically within our community and our family. And sometimes it takes a very hard lesson sometimes to say, I can't be that for everybody.
That's good. That's good. I love that. That's chapter 4, boundaries.
Chapter 4, man. John got chops. You know what would be really cool? I know we have to wrap this up, but if you're listening to this and maybe you have maybe you're part of a church, you have a little small group or something you meet with, this would be a really good book to go through as a group. Don't you think? I mean, the exercises in the back would be great to go through. I just think, maybe not your typical Bible study. Maybe a bunch of people getting around and talking about how we can offend each other in love with intention and with. I think it's great. I hope you sell a ton of copies. I hope you. I wish you all the best. I hope your podcast is. In fact, I haven't checked it out. I'm going to check out your podcast. Same title, right? Permission to Offend podcast.
Permission to Offend podcast.
I'm assuming you can listen to that wherever podcasts are streamed and enjoyed.
That's correct.
That's awesome. Any parting words for us before we wrap up and we all head out?
Well, I have really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that it's not just given all of us, the three of us, some things to think about, but your audience as well. And I really do thank you so much for having me and for being willing to have these conversations and talk more about giving ourselves permission to offend. So, gentlemen, Thank you so much for the opportunity.
On behalf of John, myself, and all three of our listeners, we appreciate you. We thank you for. I'm just kidding. At some point, I'm going to offend our 6 listeners. I've cut 3 of them out. But if you're listening and you've made it this far, which I hope you have, go buy the book.
Yeah,
go to a local bookstore. This is a book published on a major publisher, so you should be able to find this in your local bookstore. If you have to give Jeff Bezos money, I guess. Okay, shop local if you can.
And there are other online options than Amazon.
This is
true.
Sorry,
I'm gonna say the big word. I'm sorry.
You can say Barnes and Noble,
but there are other online options
by now too, didn't he? Jeff Bezos probably owns Barnes and Noble.
Probably.
Regardless, check out the podcast. We'll link to all this stuff in the show notes when it's released. Yeah. We'll make sure that you have an easy way to get the book, an easy way to listen to the podcast. I think this would be a really, really good book to have as a small group study for a while. I think it'd be great. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.